acquiring a language and starting to be competent in the use of your own language or a second language, it is obviously a difficult and strong achievement considering the cognitive system. For that reason, there are quite a large number of theories that have been trying to explain the processes leading us into this type of competence, this function, like the linguistic function. So it is not possible to cover all of them in 2 hours because it's really dense. Therefore, the main idea is to introduce some of the frameworks, mainly 2 of these theoretical frameworks, but also to start to reflect about different empirical methods that can be used to try to respond to these 2 empirical methods. Again, it is not possible to cover a wide range of methods in these 2 hours. The 3 main learning objectives is to know more on the key hypothesis. We'll be dealing with both language and a little bit of numerical knowledge as well. The second objective is to understand some of the empirical methods applied to the assessment of early knowledge of language and numeracy. And finally, to know a little bit, to evaluate them, to know a little bit more about the problems that they might have when we are using them. The contents are going to go through 5 topics. The first one, it will be the presentation of a polarized set of theories, 30, 40 years, but it's still a polarized area. The second one is one example of implicit learning, because I think that it would really help in order to understand the differences between these theories. And then we will go through some experimental methods for the study of foreign language comprehension, and a very brief introduction to developmental language disorder. And finally, we will have some slides with the acquisition of numeracy. I'm presenting this slide with the contents because it's not going to follow a timeline. So I'm going to be getting back and forth all the time. So in order to understand the theories, I think that it's a good idea to think about 3 key debates in human development. The first one is the way that development starts. And this debate is normally known as the nature versus nurture. So basically the innate versus non-innate debate. The second one is the role taken by the person. Some theories stress the active role of children in this case. Some of them consider children a more passive system. And finally, how the progression across the lifespan takes place. Some theories prefer to think in a more continuous, gradual progression, whereas other theories prefer to consider development as a more discontinuous way. So, for a start, I'm going to cover 2 very recent theories. They have been formulated in 2019 or 2020, so they're just very fresh. The first one is what is called rational constructivism. So, as you can see, these 2 ideas, rationalism and constructivism, are not new at all, but it is a recently published theory. So I have chosen it because it really stems from a classical approach to cognition, stemming from rationalism and constructivism. So this theory is focusing on these huge brain power. And the alternative, I've chosen the radical exemplars model. I've chosen it for two reasons. First, because it's radical, so it's really polarizing the field. And I think that's good because it is easy to understand what they are trying to say. And second, because it is opposed in many ways to the other one. Because in this case, the idea is that we human beings are very limited when we are processing our environment. And this limitation is actually the key mechanism to learn. So our brains actually develop creative and productive knowledge because they can't account for all the huge number of information that or information data that we have to process continuously. Before we actually go to the two theories, I'm going to present a classical example. So the idea is how children become productive in both understanding and expressing ideas in past tense. And there are two options. The first one, I think, is probably easier to understand because it's based on rules. So it's the idea that we human beings are using rules to express actions in past tense. So basically, we learned that ed marks past tense. So whenever we want to express a past tense action, we apply ed at the end of action words. So for instance, let's say that we learned that the new action can be expressed with the verb glorp. So it's basically, it's a made-up verb, it doesn't exist. So glorp, say that children learn that glorp can express any action that you can think about. So basically, they would apply the rule glorped because they have these symbolic combination rules. So they can combine two symbols and produce a new piece of information. Now, the alternative account is the item-based one. And the idea is basically that children would be generalizing from frequent items. So say that, for instance, tried is a frequent form. So whenever the child tries to express something like going in past tense, they would say things like go. Rational constructivism is formulated by Fei Xu in Berkeley, California. The idea is that children start learning with proto-conceptual primitives. So as you can see, he has a heavy nature-focused approach. So it is considering that the innate prerequisites are already there when children are born. Also says that adults represent the world using abstract intuitive theories. So this might sound a little bit like Piaget, if you are familiar with Piaget theory. We will cover a little bit of Piaget later on. But you might think that basically it is not very different to that. Fraser would say that that's not the case, that C is providing a really different theory to Piaget. And we will see in what regards they think is different. But by now, let's just say that we adults can produce these abstract intuitive theories. In practice, what does it mean? It means that we can process language in a rule-based way, so we can understand the rules of our languages, to put it like that. So we can differentiate between subject, verb, objects, and we can operate with these linguistic categories. The third one is, the third idea is that there are three main learning mechanisms. One of them is innate, so it's our ability to produce grammar or to understand the structure of the world and to elaborate symbolic knowledge about things. So first, we are predetermined to produce abstract representations of things, i.e. words, morphemes, and second, from very early, we can process the structure of sentences. So whenever we are very little, say we are 1 year old, and we are exposed to a sentence, we can understand the subject, verb, object structure of this sentence. Second learning mechanism is probabilistic learning. And this is something that really makes this theory a little bit special, because many of the other theories in the same nativist approach were not ready to accept probabilistic learning. But Spatial believes that we human beings can process the world in terms of how likely something is to happen and how unlikely something is to happen. And finally, constructivist thinking. What does it mean? It means basically that at the beginning we are more focused on things that are present here and now, and gradually we start to process more abstract information. Again, this might seem very close to Piaget if you are familiar with the theory, but as I'm saying, Facial all the time is trying to say, no, but this theory is different to Piaget. Basically, it's different in the sense that she believes that children have a predisposition to acquire different domains, and Piaget had a very general approach. So Facial would think that our brain is prepared to, for instance, process numbers in a specific way, but also process grammar and lexical knowledge in a completely different way, because we have, following a theory by Fodor, we have these kind of modules or modular structure mind. And finally, according to Facial, children are active learners. So to summarize, this theory is considering that it is a nature-focused process, so very innate. The children are active. It's actually discontinuous because we either acquire one grammatical structure or not. Okay, the alternative theory that I am presenting here is what is called the radical exemplar model. And it's presented by Ben Ambridge. The idea is that speakers cannot formulate abstract rule-based constructions, so it's completely different. Basically because we adults do not have grammatical rules in our memory, so we don't store grammatical information. So according to Ambridge, what we do is just to pick some exemplars, some prototypical items, and then we generalize from those items. He formulates this on the basis that speakers prefer to store information through these very frequent items instead of using rules, because Ben Ambridge thinks that this is actually more productive. And as I was saying at the beginning, he formulates this on the basis that our brains are very limited, so it's very difficult to produce a rule. So our brain is not capable of elaborating grammatical rules. So all we do is just to find either words, morphemes, or sentences that are very frequent, and gradually we generalize this information to new possible items. I know that both theories are really complex, they are very abstract, but by now I would just suggest that you understand that The first one is nature-focused, and so rational constructivism is nature-focused, whereas radical exemplar, the radical exemplar model is nurture-focused. Both of them are suggesting an active child, but Umbridge's theory, so radical exemplar model, is suggesting a continuous way of